Topic is the Charleston church shooting from 2015. So we're going to look at, start with this particular piece, which comes from History of Terrorism by Law. That is the name of the author. And you can see some of the questions here that I decided to ask. What were white Southerners fighting for, according to the reading? And link reading to the slave section and race that we've been looking at. So for the most part, we're going to be looking at the responses, and this is going to be, a piece that is going to address terrorism and the response to perceived oppression. When we look at this particular reading, it does appear that the birth of the Klan emerges as a response to the end of the Civil War. And there seems to be this belief that the Klan members are being the ones that are discriminated against, and they are the ones that are fighting for the preservation of their past. And here we see the birth of the Klan, just some of the issues that we had addressed. So now I'm going to move on to the Charleston church shooting. Keep in mind some of the items that we want to think about here, because this is definitely going to be an issue that is going to possibly upset people. So we don't want to attack anybody in class. We want to show respect for the ideas of others. So I'm asking this closure question: what is the solution? The solution to the race problem? And if oppression is oppression, there is a grouping of white Americans with the belief that they are being oppressed, then how should we or society deal with their view? So around 2021, around February, March, this chart had come out and raised a couple of eyebrows. People were upset. Some individuals felt that this chart was racist and had no place within education. Keep in mind, this class focuses on race, class, gender, and gay rights. So we will address issues like this, but it isn't an issue that is out of context. It is an issue where we're looking at the vicious cycle and other social models. Anyway, what I want you to think about here is this chart. I'm not here to argue that this chart is accurate. What I do want to focus on is what would your response to this chart be? So put yourself in the position of a white American, and this chart comes out, and your teacher, somebody's asking you to, position where you believe you are. Where are you at? White privilege, which definitely gets people upset. To just look at that from a social point of view, a social model. My experience is that definitely gets people from 0 to 60 real quick. White benefit. Is there any sort of benefit to being white? Here we see white abolitionists, which is a reference to slavery, and the other side of the spectrum, a white supremacist. So you're either one of the two. And again, try to put yourself in the position of a white American and how your response to that, if you're being asked to identify where you stand, how that might potentially create a problem. And why is this important? Well, it does seem to be that there's a grouping in America that feel that whites are being oppressed. And again, I'm not here to argue whether that's accurate or not, but let's try to put the vicious cycle model. If you believe that unemployment is higher amongst whites, and that is a result of something like affirmative action. If you believe that, then that would act as a social disadvantage. If there's prejudice and discrimination that is on a micro level, we talked about this being micro, this being more macro, where you have institutions. So let's just say, you are able to say all whites are racist. You see on television, white actors always playing the role of the racist. And that becomes something that's allowed. Let's take the use of terms. Why is it that you can use a derogatory term for one group of people, yet it goes unchecked when it is one that is directed towards someone white? For example, if I use this particular word here, or this word, I don't think society is really going to say that that is a racial slur, even though it is, and it could still generate, feelings of unhappiness and sadness and it could be viewed by the individual on the receiving end as racist. But society doesn't view it that way. Will that create a belief in inferiority among the victim? Or are we going to say, well, whites have historically in America been in power, and they are in a position where they receive benefits from society indirectly or directly. And as a result of that, since they have been the oppressor for so long, they are never going to be in a position where they can experience this vicious cycle. Well, I would say that doesn't matter because that's dependent on the individual who's on the receiving end. Yes, that might be something that society will look at on a large scale, but for the most part, how does that impact the individual? Let's take this individual in school, and he is called a racist. And that individual now has an understanding of what he can or cannot say or do within the society. Is that individual going to develop a positive or negative view on race? So why is this important? Well, we do know that there have been protests over the last couple of years in this country. The Jews will not replace us. Here we see an anti-Semitic issue. Replace us. Is that an economic argument? Because yes, this on some level does appear to be about jobs. Now we're going to look primarily at Dylan Roof. And so in this case, if you're not familiar with the story, Dylan Roof went into a predominantly black church, prayed with individuals after sitting with them for a amount of time, and then decided to execute individuals. Here we see an image of Dylan Roof just from a quick Google search. And then here is his racial manifesto that was later released. He claims that he was not raised in a racist home or environment. That's his claim. He lives in the South, and he says that almost every person has a small amount of racial awareness. Then he puts the blame here on another group of individuals, but it is a superficial awareness. He moves on to argue that white and black kids would make racial jokes towards each other, but they were all just jokes. And he argues that he believes that blacks are the real racists. We see some images from Dylan Roof, as well as some of the victims. There's a little bit more from his manifesto. He's basically explaining what he did, and he's arguing that there are brutal black on white murders, and then he was in disbelief. So if the media is portraying, the white attack of someone black, why is the media not portraying other? And so from his point of view, this is going to be something that is discriminatory. Again, I'm not trying to argue on behalf of Dylan Roof at all. What I am concerned with is this feeling. Are we just going to disregard individuals who feel this way, disregard their feelings, and say that you're white and you have no reason to feel that way? Because I don't necessarily know that that's going to solve the problem. Here he brings up the Trayvon Martin case. And he's arguing that hundreds of these black on white murders go ignored. So if we take that belief, and again, it's his belief, his personal view, where does that fall within this particular, situation here? Is it prejudice and discrimination? You can say, well, he's white. He doesn't have any, he shouldn't feel that way because he's white and, whites have privilege. But do we just disregard his feelings? Do we write this individual off and say that his views do not matter? Because if you're going to have that attitude, and he feels that way, then how should society deal with this individual to prevent the killing of 9 churchgoers? Here we see some more images. Here we see another victim. Here he brings up the issue of the Jewish problem. Notice how he censors himself here. He says that black people view everything through a racial lens, and he seems to be upset about that. Here he gets into some anti-Semitic arguments. Here we see Dylan Roof at a museum, another victim, more from his manifesto. History classes create a subconscious white superiority complex, an inferiority complex in blacks. How do we reverse that? I think I thought we resolved this with Brown versus Board of Ed. Wasn't that what Thurgood Marshall argued? Here we see some pretty nasty stuff. Another victim. He also talks in his manifesto about Hispanics, Asians. What about the New Zealand mosque attack? Here's some from his manifesto. And we see, these issues here. He says there was a racial component of the attack. Does this individual, as well as Dylan Roof, feel that they are defending? And if they believe that they're defending, then that means that they believe that they're under attack. How do we deal with that? Come back to the vicious cycle. So it definitely seems to be this belief among the Dylan Roofs of the world that these issues are happening to white, men and women. I don't necessarily know if they have a belief in their inferiority. What we do know is that they've kind of taken a turn in a direction where they're going to respond in defense of the perceived attack that they're experiencing. Some of this on small level might come back to the book White Fragility that the author outlines. Some of these microaggressions that exist that we'll look at in class. Again, my point here is just, do we dismiss all of these views that white Americans are experiencing, and white males and females around the world? There is a belief that there is a white genocide. Now, if you're laughing because how could there be a white genocide? That sounds ridiculous. I think that would, be viewed as offensive among the Dylan Roof-minded individuals. And I'm not trying to advocate on behalf of these individuals, just trying to figure out what is the solution. Has the racial issue in America gotten to a point where there is no solution? And there definitely seems to be this belief among white Americans that they are being oppressed. And, their life is problematic. So how do we deal with this particular issue? Do we just write the Dylan Roofs off and create more anger and hostility where more comparable attacks happen? Do we figure out a way to work with individuals? It doesn't appear that education is working, as Dylan Roof mentioned in his manifesto. What is the solution here?